The rope burns on Magnolia Westbrook's wrists told the story before her voice could. Dawn light revealed her slumped form against Ezekiel Thornfield's fence post, abandoned like discarded cargo in the Montana frost. A crumpled note fluttered beneath her boots. Zeke's horse nickered uneasily as he dismounted. 19 years old, maybe 20, white girl. Tied to his property line like a debt marker. The note bore clumsy handwriting, payment for what's owed. She's yours now. Signed with a shaky Westbrook. Her eyes tracked his movement with animal wariness. Tears had frozen on her cheeks. Easy now. His knife cut through hemp rope thick as his thumb. Got you. She collapsed against him, body racked with silent sobs, the kind of crying that came from deep wells of hurt. Hoofbeats drummed across the valley floor. 3 riders approached fast. Zeke recognized the lead horse before the man. Cornelius Ashworth's bay gelding ate ground with expensive purpose. Zeke helped the girl stand. She swayed but held her feet. What do we have here, Thornfield? Ashworth's voice carried the particular poison of a man who'd found exactly what he'd been hunting for. New ranch hand. The lie came smooth as creek water. Miss Westbrook needed work. Ashworth's pale eyes moved between them like a snake tasting air. Mighty young for ranch work. Times are hard all over. Indeed they are. Ashworth touched his hat brim in mock courtesy. Miss Westbrook, you look a mite worse for wear. She straightened despite the tremor in her legs. I'm fine. Of course you are. His smile held winter's edge. Well, Thornfield, I'm sure you'll provide proper Christian supervision. The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples would spread. Ashworth wheeled his horse. His men followed without looking back. Their dust cloud hung in the air long after they'd vanished over the ridge. Zeke studied the girl's face. Dirt couldn't hide good bones. Fear couldn't mask intelligence in those green eyes. Can you ride? She nodded. The ranch house sat in a hollow between rolling hills, built from local stone and timber cut from his own land. Smoke rose straight from the chimney in the still air. Moses Pike emerged from the barn, his weathered face creasing with concern. Found her tied to the south fence. Zeke helped her down from his horse. Father left her as payment for debts. Moses's jaw tightened. 15 years of friendship made words unnecessary. They both understood the mathematics of reputation in territory that barely tolerated their success. Inside, warmth hit like a physical thing. The girl's shoulders dropped for the first time. Zeke poured coffee into a tin cup, added sugar without asking. Thank you. Her voice carried traces of education. Not common frontier stock. You got somewhere to go? She shook her head. Family? My father. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. He didn't just abandon me. He sold me. To pay gambling debts to someone they call the preacher. Zeke set down his cup. The coffee had gone cold anyway. This preacher got a real name? Josiah Blackwood. Travels with armed men. Calls himself a minister, but there's nothing holy about his work. Moses moved to the window, scanning the horizon with old soldier's eyes. How long before he comes looking? He already is. She wrapped both hands around the warm cup. That's why my father left me here. Figured I'd be found quick. Figured wrong about who'd find me. Zeke had built this ranch from nothing. Every board, every fence post, every head of cattle represented victory against a world that preferred him broken. 15 years of careful progress. Reputation earned drop by drop like blood from a wound. Why didn't your father just run? Blackwood finds runners. Makes examples. Her voice dropped to whisper. My father thought leaving me tied up would look like accident. Like he'd been forced. Was he? She met his eyes directly. No, the word hung in the warm air between them. Truth often weighed more than lies. Moses returned from the window. Riders coming from town. Sheriff's dust. Duncan Whitmore rode alone, which meant official business rather than trouble. His horse was lathered despite the cool morning. "Zeke." The sheriff touched his hat. "Miss, Sheriff. Heard you took on help. News travels fast." Whitmore shifted in his saddle. "Ashworth spreading word about your arrangement. People are talking. People always talk. This kind of talk can turn dangerous." The sheriff's eyes found the girl. "What's your full name, miss?" "Magnolia Westbrook." Whitmore went pale as winter sky. His horse sensed the tension and danced. "Sideways, Zeke." His voice carried weight like thunder before storms. "Silas Westbrook died 3 months ago. Saloon fight in Denver. The world tilted on its axis. Everything Zeke thought he understood scattered like leaves in wind. If her father was dead, who had left Magnolia tied to his fence? Sheriff Whitmore's horse pawed frozen ground while silence stretched between them like barbed wire. Magnolia's cup trembled in her hands. Coffee spilled across her knuckles. "You sure about Silas Westbrook?" Zeke's voice carried the weight of a man watching his world. "Shift. Saw the body myself. Bullet to the chest over a card game." Whitmore adjusted his hat brim lower. "Been dead since October." The mathematics of deception spread across Magnolia's face. She set down the cup with deliberate care. Her hands had stopped shaking. "I need to tell you something." Each word fell heavy as stones into still water. "Silas wasn't my real father." Zeke waited. The wind had picked up outside, rattling windows with winter's breath. "My mother was Elizabeth Westbrook. Railroad money. Mining claims. Silas married her when I was 12. Magnolia's voice grew steady as confession flowed. "After she died, he spent everything. Lost the ranch. Lost the house. But he couldn't touch my inheritance. Not until I turned 21. Moses stepped closer to the window. His shoulders carried the tension of a man expecting trouble. "So Blackwood took you for the money. More than money. Land rights. Mineral. Claims in 3 territories." She met Zeke's eyes without flinching. "Worth killing for." Sheriff Whitmore leaned forward in his saddle. "How'd you end up tied to that fence?" The question hung in the air between truth and fabrication. Magnolia's fingers traced the rope burns on her wrists. "I escaped." The words came quiet as prayer. "Blackwood's men had me in a cabin 20 miles south. I got away during a storm 2 nights ago." "And tied yourself to my fence." Understanding dawned in Zeke's voice. "I knew your reputation. Fair man, decent man." Color rose in her cheeks. "I gambled you'd help." The wind gusted harder, sending dust devils across the yard. Sheriff Whitmore's horse sidled nervously. "This Blackwood coming for you? He's already here." Magnolia stood with newfound steadiness. "Rode into Copper Falls yesterday with 6 men, calling himself a preacher. Got papers saying he's my legal guardian." Whitmore cursed under his breath. "Papers can be forged. These look real enough. Territorial seal. Judge's signature." She moved to the window beside Moses. "He knows his business." Zeke felt the familiar weight of impossible choices. Help meant painting a target on everything he'd built. Walking away meant watching evil triumph over innocence. The arithmetic never balanced. "What's he calling himself?" "Now, Reverend Josiah Blackwood. Traveling minister bringing salvation to the frontier." Bitterness crept into her voice. "People eat it up. Especially when he talks about rescuing wayward souls." Moses turned from the window. 5 riders coming. Hard from town. Dust plumes rose against the gray sky. Horses running with purpose rather than leisure. Sheriff Whitmore straightened in his saddle. "That'll be them." His hand moved unconsciously toward his sidearm. "Miss, you might want to step inside." Magnolia moved behind the doorframe but kept watching. Her jaw was set with determination that spoke of generations of strong women. The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust and horse sweat. Josiah Blackwood commanded the center position like a general among his troops. Tall man, gray beard, eyes that held winter's cruelty beneath minister's clothing. Sheriff Whitmore. Blackwood's voice carried practiced authority. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Don't believe I do. My ward, Magnolia Westbrook. Poor child ran off in a fit of hysteria. Been searching for days. Blackwood's gaze found Zeke. Mr. Thornfield, isn't it? Heard you found her. Found someone tied to my fence. Helped like any Christian would, of course. Blackwood reached into his coat with theatrical care. These papers establish my legal guardianship. Signed by Judge Morrison in Denver. Sheriff Whitmore examined the documents. His face revealed nothing, but Zeke caught the slight nod. They looked legitimate. Miss Westbrook appears to be of sound mind and body. Appearances deceive, Sheriff. The girl suffers from nervous conditions, female hysteria, prone to wild stories and flights of fancy. Blackwood's smile held no warmth. I'm taking her to a proper medical facility in California. Magnolia stepped into view. I don't want to. Go. See, delusions of persecution. Claims I'm some sort of criminal. Blackwood shook his head with practiced sorrow. Dr. Bennett can explain her condition in detail. One of Blackwood's men shifted forward, young face but old eyes. Hand resting easy on his gun butt, the others matched his posture. Professional intimidation wrapped in religious authority. The law is clear. Sheriff Whitmore folded the papers. Guardian has rights. Sheriff. Zeke's voice cut through the tension. Might want to verify those papers before enforcing them. You questioning territorial authority. Blackwood's mask slipped for a moment. Steel showed beneath the minister's facade. Questioning timing. Girl's inheritance comes available soon. Convenient guardianship. Blackwood's men spread wider. Casual movement that put them at better angles. Moses stepped onto the porch. His presence added weight to the equation. I'll need time to send a telegram to Denver. Sheriff Whitmore's words bought precious hours. Confirm the paperwork, of course. Blackwood's smile returned, but never reached his eyes. I'll be staying at the hotel. Miss Westbrook can remain here under your supervision until matters are resolved. The riders departed with deliberate slowness, a show of confidence mixed with veiled threat. Their dust hung in the air long after hoofbeats faded. Magnolia sagged against the doorframe. The performance had cost her. How long before that telegram gets answered? Zeke asked. 3 days if we're lucky. Week if we're not. Whitmore gathered his reins. Watch yourselves. This Blackwood didn't get those papers at a church social. The sheriff rode toward town with the weight of the law pressing on his shoulders. Right and wrong rarely aligned so neatly in the territory. Usually a man had to choose which master to serve. Inside the ranch house, Magnolia sat heavily at the kitchen table. Her hands had found their tremor again. He'll come for me. She spoke to the coffee cup more than the men. Legal papers or not, he won't wait forever. Moses checked the rifle rack near the door. Old habits from harder times. How many men? Does he really have? 8 that I saw, maybe more. She lifted her eyes to Zeke. I won't let him destroy what you've built here. I can run. Running's what got you tied to that fence. Staying might get you killed. Zeke studied her face. In the lamplight, saw his mother's determination in the set of her jaw. His sister's fire in her green eyes. Women who'd faced impossible odds with nothing but will and stubborn courage. Then we better make sure it doesn't come to that. Outside, the wind carried winter's promise across the valley. Change was coming whether they wanted it or not. The only question was whether they'd meet it standing or running. The first dead calf appeared 3 days later. Moses found it in the north pasture, foam dried around its muzzle. Poison, clean and professional. Zeke knelt beside the animal, studying tracks in the soft earth, boot prints, 2 horses. Men who knew their business and didn't care about hiding. Warning shot. Moses's voice carried the weariness of a man who'd seen this dance before. Magnolia stood at the fence line, her silhouette sharp against the morning sky. She'd learned to read the land's moods in those 3 days. Learned which sounds meant trouble and which meant peace. How many head do we stand to lose? Her question held practical weight. Fear had burned away, leaving calculation behind. All of them, if this keeps up. Zeke rose, brushing dirt from his knees. Blackwood's not playing games anymore. The town of Copper Falls had split down invisible lines. Since the preacher's arrival. Doc Harrison nodded when Zeke passed his office. Mrs. Chun still sold supplies without comment, but others turned away. Conversations stopped when he entered buildings. Cornelius Ashworth held court at the Silver Dollar Saloon, his voice carrying. Through thin walls, tales of improper arrangements. Questions about Christian values. Poison dressed as concern for community standards. Blackwood worked the other end of town from the hotel parlor. Bible readings that somehow always touched. On lost sheep returning to the fold. Sermons about the dangers of harboring sinful influences. Gospel wrapped around threats. The combination was surgical. Ashworth's local grudges married to Blackwood's outside authority. 2 predators who'd found common cause in Zeke's destruction. Moses returned from town with supplies and worry etched deep in his weathered face. The general store owner had demanded payment in advance. First time in 10 years, they're squeezing. He set down flour sacks with deliberate care. Jimmy Chun says his pa got visited by 2 of Blackwood's men. Friendly conversation about business relationships. Magnolia looked up from the ledger she'd been working on. Numbers told their own story. Ranch accounts balanced to the penny. Supply costs tracked against seasonal patterns. The mind behind the calculations was sharp as winter wind. We need allies. She set down her pencil. People with their own reasons. To oppose Blackwood. Territories full of folks who keep their heads down. Zeke checked the rifle rack for the 3rd time that day. Standing up's dangerous business, so's rolling over. That evening, Zeke taught her to shoot. The Colt felt heavy in her hands, but she held it steady. Her first shot went wide. Second found the fence post. Third split wood dead center. Natural. Talent. He stood close enough to guide her stance. Close enough to smell lavender soap in her hair. Their eyes met over the revolver's barrel. Something passed between them. Understanding that went deeper than words or circumstances. Recognition of kindred spirits forged by hardship. The moment stretched until Moses cleared his throat from the porch. Reality returned with the weight of watching eyes and wagging tongues. Best get inside. Sun's dropping. Lamplight made the kitchen warm as summer. Magnolia worked on the books while Zeke cleaned his rifle. Domestic routine that felt natural as breathing. Dangerous as dynamite in the current climate. They're watching. U.S. She spoke without looking up from columns of figures. Ashworth's got someone posted on the ridge. Seen the sun flash off field glasses twice today. Let them watch. Zeke ran the cleaning rod down the barrel with practiced rhythm. Nothing to hide. Appearance matters more than truth. You know that. She was right. In frontier society, reputation was currency. Once spent, impossible to earn back. They were walking a tightrope over a canyon of gossip and assumption. The message arrived at dawn. Piece of paper nailed to the barn door. Words cut from newspaper and pasted together. Last warning. Send her back or face consequences. Moses found it first, studying the crude lettering with soldiers' eyes. Professional work. Blackwood's getting impatient. Good. Magnolia's voice held steel. Impatient men make mistakes. They also make graves. Zeke folded the paper carefully. Evidence for later use. Time's running short. The telegraph office in town buzzed with activity. Sheriff Whitmore's inquiries had stirred official interest. Questions about Judge Morrison's signature, requests for verification of guardianship papers, bureaucratic wheels turning slowly but inevitably. Blackwood sensed the shift. His sermons grew more pointed, his men more visible on the streets, pressure building toward some inevitable explosion. The breaking point came when they found Moses in the alley behind the general store, beaten but not broken. His left arm hung useless, but his eyes still burned with righteous anger. 3 of them. He accepted Magnolia's ministrations with stoic grace. Wanted to send a message. Message received. Zeke's voice carried Winters. Promise. Time to send one back. But Magnolia caught his arm before he could reach for his coat. Her touch stopped him cold. Not that way. Her fingers tightened on his sleeve. That's what they want. Make you the aggressor. Give them excuse to finish this legal. She was right again. Violence would play into their hands. Turn him from victim to villain in the community's eyes. Blackwood understood frontier justice better than most. Then how? Information. She moved to the window, studying the horizon with new purpose. Blackwood's too smooth, too prepared. Men like him don't work alone. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we need to know who's really behind this. Railroad companies don't send one man to steal an entire valley. Her reflection in the glass showed determination carved from stone. There's more to this than my inheritance. Moses struggled to sit straighter despite his injuries. Girl's got a point. This feels bigger than one man's greed. That night, Magnolia volunteered for the dangerous work. She knew Blackwood's operation from the inside, knew his habits and blind spots. Her plan was simple as a knife blade and twice as sharp. Too risky. Zeke's objection came automatic as breathing. Everything's risky now. She checked the small pistol he'd given her. But doing nothing guarantees we lose. The moon was dark when she slipped out. Shadow among shadows, moving toward town with purpose that wouldn't be denied. If answers existed, she'd find them. If Blackwood had weaknesses, she'd exploit them. The ranch house felt hollow without her presence. Zeke paced the kitchen while Moses dozed fitfully in his chair. Both men understood the mathematics of the situation. If she was caught, they'd lose everything. If she succeeded, they might survive. If she never came back, survival wouldn't matter anyway. Dawn broke gray and cold across the valley. No sign of riders approaching. No sound of gunshots. From town. Just silence stretching toward the horizon where everything depended on a woman's courage and a desperate gamble. The wind picked up, rattling windows with winter's breath. Change was coming whether they were ready or not. Magnolia returned with dawn and papers that changed everything. Her dress was torn from crawling through hotel windows, but her eyes blazed with discovery's fire. Railroad maps. She spread the stolen documents across the kitchen table. Survey routes. Purchase agreements. The whole valley marked for acquisition. Zeke studied the careful notations. Property lines drawn in red ink. His ranch circled like a target. Every homestead marked with dollar amounts and acquisition dates. Continental Pacific Railroad. Moses read over his shoulder despite his injured arm. They're buying up everything. Not buying, stealing. Magnolia pointed to smaller print. Blackwood's working with territorial officials, forged deeds, fraudulent claims. They take the land, then sell it legal to the railroad. The mathematics were brutal in their simplicity. Identify valuable property. Remove current owners through intimidation or legal manipulation. Transfer ownership to railroad interests at massive profit. How many counties? Zeke's voice carried the weight of expanding understanding. At least 6, maybe more. She pulled out a leather portfolio. This was in Blackwood's personal effects. List of targets. Timeline for completion. The Thornfield Ranch was scheduled for acquisition within 2 weeks. Final phase of a systematic campaign that had been running for months. Other names on the list were crossed out in black ink. Completed business. Those accidents last spring. Moses touched his bruised ribs gingerly. The Hendersons. The Miller family. Wasn't weather that drove them out. Blackwood's been cleaning house all along. Magnolia's finger traced the timeline. My inheritance was just the biggest prize. He's been working smaller targets while waiting for me to come of age. Doc Harrison arrived as they studied the evidence. His medical bag suggested official business, but his expression held conspiracy's weight. Treated 3 more accidents this week. He accepted coffee with hands that trembled slightly. Broken bones that don't match the stories. Injuries that speak of persuasion rather than mishap. The Kowalski family? Left yesterday. Sudden decision to visit relatives back east. Doc Harrison's voice carried bitter understanding. Funny how many folks got urgent family business lately. Zeke spread the railroad maps wider. The pattern was clear once you knew to look for it. Properties acquired in sequence. Strategic purchases that would give Continental Pacific complete control over transportation routes through 3 territories. We need Sheriff Whitmore. Magnolia gathered the most damning documents. This evidence changes everything. Might not be enough. Doc Harrison studied the papers with physician's precision. These look official enough to fool most judges. Railroads got money for good forgers. Then we make it enough. Zeke's words carried finality. Time to stop playing defense. The trip to town required careful planning. Moses stayed behind despite his protests. His injuries made him liability in a fight. Zeke and Magnolia rode together, evidence secured in saddlebags that could be hidden or destroyed if necessary. Copper Falls buzzed with nervous energy. Blackwoods. Men lounged outside the saloon with predators' patience. Ashworth held court on the hotel porch, his voice carrying tales of moral decay and community threats. Sheriff Whitmore's office sat at the town's heart, but felt isolated as a desert island. The lawman studied their evidence with growing alarm. This changes things. He set down the railroad correspondence with careful hands. Question is whether it changes them enough. What do you mean? Magnolia leaned forward. Evidence is compelling. But Blackwood's papers still look legal. Without proof they're forged. I can't act on suspicion alone. Whitmore rubbed his jaw. Need something more concrete. More concrete than systematic fraud? More concrete than good forgeries and circumstantial patterns. His honesty carried apology's weight. Judge Morrison's signature looks real. Without him saying otherwise, these guardianship papers stand. Zeke felt the trap closing around them. Legal system designed for justice, but vulnerable to those who understood its weaknesses. Blackwood had studied frontier law better than most. Lawyers, how long until we hear from Denver? Telegraph came this morning. Whitmore pulled a yellow paper from his desk drawer. Judge Morrison died 2 weeks ago. Natural causes. Been sick for months. The room went silent. Final piece of Blackwood's puzzle clicking into place. Forged documents using a dead man's authority. No one left to contradict the paperwork. So we're on our own. Magnolia's voice held steel rather than despair. Unless we can prove the forgery some other way. Whitmore studied the guardianship papers again. These are good work. Professional. Quality. Someone spent serious money. Money leaves trails. Doc Harrison spoke from his position by the window. Forgers don't work for free. Neither do corrupt officials. Trail goes cold without resources to follow it. Zeke understood the mathematics of investigation. Time we don't have. Money we can't spare. Outside, Ashworth's voice rose and practiced. Outrage. Tales of proper young ladies corrupted by unsuitable influences. Community standards threatened by dangerous precedents. The crowd's murmur suggested receptive audience. He's building towards something. Magnolia watched through the window. Public pressure for official action. Town meeting. Tonight, Whitmore confirmed her suspicion. Ashworth called it Blackwood supporting. Community discussion about moral standards and legal obligations. The trap was springing. Public forum where emotion could override evidence. Town divided by fear and prejudice, asked to choose between law and justice. Outcome was predictable. They'll demand you enforce the guardianship. Zeke's observation carried certainty. Probably. Whitmore's honesty was brutal in its clarity. Mob justice dressed as community concern. Hard to resist when everyone's watching. Then we better give them something else to watch. Magnolia gathered the evidence with renewed purpose. Time to turn this meeting into something they didn't plan for. What are you thinking? Public trial. Her smile held Winter's edge. If they want community judgment, let's give them all the facts to judge. Doc Harrison moved from the window. Dangerous game. Once you make this public, there's no taking it back. There's no going back anyway. Zeke understood her logic. Might as well go forward fighting. They spent the afternoon preparing their case. Evidence organized for maximum impact. Testimonies. Coordinated between the few allies they could trust. Battle plan drawn for a war they couldn't afford to lose. The sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the sky blood red. Evening brought its own tensions. Community gathering in the church hall. Voices raised in anger and fear. Democracy's messines is playing out in real time. Magnolia checked her small pistol one final time. The weight felt familiar now. Tool of last resort in a situation where all other options had been exhausted. Ready? Zeke's hand found hers. No. Her fingers tightened around his, but we're going anyway. The church bell tolled 7 times. Copper Falls gathered to decide their fate. Justice waited in the balance between truth and fear. Outside, the wind picked up with evening's arrival. Change was coming whether anyone was ready or not. The only question was what form it would take. The church hall filled with tension thick as smoke. Every seat claimed. Standing room pressed shoulder to shoulder. Copper Falls had turned out to witness judgment. Cornelius Ashworth commanded the front of the room with politician's ease. His voice carried over restless murmurs, painting pictures of moral decay and community responsibility. Behind him, Josiah Blackwood nodded approval from the front pew. Christian duty demands action. Ashworth's words found receptive ears among those who preferred simple answers to complex questions. When improper arrangements threaten our children's welfare, decent folks must speak up. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Fear dressed as righteousness. Prejudice wrapped in concern for community standards. Zeke and Magnolia entered together, their presence shifting the rooms. Energy. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The accused had arrived for their trial. Sheriff Whitmore stood near the back, his hand resting unconsciously on his gun belt. Doc Harrison sat with the Chun family, quiet solidarity in a sea of judgment. Moses had come despite his injuries, his weathered face set with determination. Mr. Thornfield. Ashworth's voice carried mock courtesy. Miss Westbrook, how good of you to join us. Zeke said nothing. Words were weapons in rooms like this. Better to let opponents reveal themselves first. Blackwood rose from his pew with theatrical gravity. The stolen papers had been replaced, but his performance remained unchanged. Righteous minister concerned for his wayward ward. Sheriff Whitmore, I trust you verified my legal authority over Miss Westbrook. His voice carried command disguised as inquiry. Still investigating. Whitmore's answer bought precious time but little hope. Investigating what exactly? Ashworth seized the opening. Man has proper papers. Girl's clearly disturbed. What more verification do you need? The crowd stirred restlessly. Simple logic that appealed to simple minds. Legal documents trumped complicated truth in frontier justice. Magnolia stepped forward. Her movement cut through the room's noise like blade through cloth. "May I speak?" Ashworth's smile held Winter's cruelty. "Of course, dear. Though I fear your condition makes reliable testimony difficult." "My condition is fine." Her voice carried across the packed hall without strain. "It's my situation that's complicated." She reached into her coat and withdrew the stolen railroad documents. Paper rustled in the silence. "Josiah Blackwood isn't a minister. He's a land speculator working for Continental Pacific Railroad." Each word fell heavy as hammer blows. "These documents prove systematic fraud across 6 counties." The room erupted, voices raised in confusion and anger. Blackwood's face went pale beneath his beard. Ashworth's confident smile flickered. "Lies!" Blackwood's voice cut through the chaos. "Desperate fabrications from a disturbed mind." "Then explain these." Magnolia spread the maps across the nearest table. "Survey routes, purchase agreements, your signature on acquisition orders." People pressed forward to see. Property lines marked in red ink. Dollar amounts assigned to their homes and businesses. The mathematics of systematic theft laid bare. Doc Harrison stood slowly. His medical authority carried weight in the community. "I've treated 17 accidents in the past 6 months. Injuries that don't match the stories. Families driven out by systematic intimidation." His voice grew stronger with each word. "This evidence explains what I've been seeing." Mrs. Chun rose next. Her English was careful but clear. "My husband's accident. 2 men warned him about business relationships before he fell down those stairs. Jakob Mueller pushed through the crowd. His family's farm was circled on the maps. Got visited last week. Friendly conversation about selling out. Now I see my land's already marked as acquired." The crowd's mood was shifting. Fear and anger, redirecting toward new targets. Blackwood sensed the change and played his final card. "Sheriff, arrest this woman for theft. Those documents were stolen from my private property." His men moved from their positions along the walls. 8 armed figures closing toward the center of the room. Professional intimidation designed to end debate through force. But Ashworth stepped between them and the crowd. His face showed dawning understanding. "You plan to take my land too." He held up one of the railroad maps. "My property's marked for acquisition next month." The betrayal cut deep. Ashworth had been played as thoroughly as anyone else. His alliance with Blackwood crumbled in the face of personal threat. "Cornelius, surely you understand business necessities." Blackwood's mask was slipping completely. "Progress requires sacrifice from everyone, not my sacrifice." Ashworth's voice carried personal fury. "Sheriff, I withdraw my complaints against Mr. Thornfield. This woman speaks truth." The room's energy shifted completely. Community anger found its proper target. Blackwood's men looked uncertain as the crowd pressed closer. Sheriff Whitmore stepped forward with authority renewed by community support. "Josiah Blackwood, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy." His voice carried legal weight. "Your men can ride out peaceful or face charges as accomplices." Blackwood's hand moved toward his coat. The gesture was subtle, but Zeke caught it. Movement born of desperation and cornered fury. "Gun!" His warning came sharp and clear. The room erupted in motion. People diving for cover. Furniture overturning. Blackwood's weapon cleared leather, but found no target in the chaos. Sheriff Whitmore's shot took him in the shoulder. Clean wound that dropped the gun, but left the man breathing. Professional marksmanship from a lawman who'd found his courage. Blackwood's men saw their leader down and chose survival over loyalty. Weapons dropped, hands raised. Fight drained out of them with their leader's blood. Anyone else want to discuss legal authority? Whitmore's question met silence. Doc Harrison moved to tend Blackwood's wound, with physician's oath overriding personal feelings. The room settled into stunned quiet as reality sank in. Magnolia stood in the aftermath, her evidence scattered but victorious. The truth had won, but at cost measured in shattered illusions and broken trust. Ashworth approached with hat in hand, his earlier hostility replaced by grudging respect. "Appears I owe you an apology." The words came hard but honest. "Both of you." Zeke nodded acceptance without warmth. Forgiveness was possible. Forgetting would take longer. What happens now? Jakob Mueller gathered his family close. "Now we rebuild." Sheriff Whitmore holstered his weapon. Legitimate law, honest business, community that protects its own. The crowd began dispersing. Into the night, crisis passed but lessons learned. Democracy had worked messily but effectively. Truth had triumphed over fear. Outside, the wind had died to whisper. Stars showed clear in the winter sky. Change had come as promised, but brought healing rather than destruction. Zeke and Magnolia walked toward their horses in comfortable silence. The battle was won. The war for their future was just beginning, but they would face it together. 2. People who'd refused to accept the limitations others placed on their worth. Partners in every sense that mattered. The road home stretched ahead, lit by starlight and possibility. 6 months passed like seasons changing. Spring brought new growth to the valley and new hope to Copper Falls. The railroad conspiracy's exposure had rippled through 3 territories, bringing federal investigators and justice long delayed. Magnolia's inheritance was restored through legitimate channels. Legal battles fought with proper lawyers in actual courtrooms. Her mineral rights and land claims validated by territorial courts that couldn't be bought or intimidated. The Thornfield Ranch expanded with honest money and ethical partnerships. Cattle grazed on land that stretched toward horizons unmarked by corporate greed. Fences built to protect rather than exclude. Zeke stood on his porch watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. The same view that had sustained him through 15 years of struggle now held promise of better times ahead. The land had weathered corruption and emerged stronger. Moses emerged from the barn, his injured arm healed but bearing permanent reminder of their struggle. His weathered face showed satisfaction of a man who'd seen justice prevail against long odds. "Horses are ready." He adjusted his hat against the morning sun. "Town's going to be busy today." The wedding was set for noon. Simple ceremony in the church where truth had triumphed over lies. Community gathering that celebrated love rather than division. Magnolia appeared in the doorway wearing her mother's dress. White silk that had survived storage and time. Her grandmother's pearls caught the light. Beauty that went deeper than appearance. "Ready?" Zeke offered his arm. "Been ready since the day you cut those ropes." They rode toward town together, past land that belonged to them in every sense that mattered. Property bought with honest money. Reputation earned through decent behavior. Future built on solid foundations. Copper Falls had transformed in the months since Blackwood's arrest. Sheriff Whitmore commanded respect from a community that had rediscovered its backbone. Doc Harrison's practice thrived among people who'd learned to value integrity over convenience. The Chun family store bustled with legitimate business. Jakob Mueller's farm prospered without fear of mysterious accidents. The Kowalski family had returned from their sudden eastern visit, finding welcome in a community that had learned to protect its own. Even Cornelius Ashworth had found redemption through honest business practices. His apology to Zeke had been followed by fair dealing and mutual respect. Not friendship, but professional courtesy that acknowledged past mistakes. The church filled with faces that had witnessed their struggle. Some had stood with them from the beginning. Others had needed time to find their courage. All were welcome in the community they'd helped build. Reverend Matthews, the circuit preacher who'd replaced Blackwood's false ministry, spoke words of commitment and partnership. Vows that acknowledged the storms they'd weathered together. In sickness and health, in prosperity and adversity. In times of peace and seasons of struggle, his voice carried understanding of what marriage meant on the frontier. Their rings were simple gold bands forged by the local blacksmith, symbols of commitment that would weather whatever challenges lay ahead. The kiss that sealed their union was gentle but certain. Two people who'd found each other in desperation and chosen to stay together in hope. The reception filled the town square with music and laughter. Tables groaned under food contributed by grateful neighbors. Children ran between dancing couples, while their parents celebrated community triumph. Moses raised the first toast, to folks who stand up when standing's hard, to justice that comes slow but comes sure, to love that grows stronger under pressure. The crowd's response echoed off the surrounding buildings, voices raised in celebration of values that had sustained them through crisis. As evening approached, Zeke and Magnolia slipped away from the festivities. Their honeymoon would be spent at the ranch, building the life they'd fought to protect. The ride home took them past the fence where everything had begun. The post where she'd been tied now marked the entrance to their expanded property, symbol of abandonment transformed into gateway to belonging. Any regrets? Zeke asked as they paused at the familiar spot. Only that it took so long to find you. Her hand found his across the space between their horses. The ranch house glowed with lamplight in the gathering dusk. Home built through struggle and sustained by love. Foundation for whatever future they chose to create. Inside, the kitchen table held architectural drawings for the school they planned to build. Educational opportunity for children of all backgrounds. Investment in the community's future. Plans for the new church sat beside the school sketches. House of worship that would welcome all congregants regardless of color or origin. Sacred space built on principles of justice and equality. The general store expansion would create jobs and opportunities. Economic growth that benefited everyone rather than enriching distant corporations. Prosperity rooted in community values. Magnolia studied the drawings by lamplight while Zeke added wood to the fire. Domestic routine that felt natural as breathing. Partnership that had grown from necessity into choice. The Hendersons want to come back. She looked up from the plans. Heard about what happened. Want to try again. Good. Valley needs good people. Zeke settled beside her at the table. Plenty of room for folks willing to work honest. Outside, the wind carried promise of change. But this time, change that brought hope rather than fear. Progress that lifted everyone rather than crushing the weak. Their first year of marriage brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. Drought tested their resolve. Early frost threatened crops. But they faced each obstacle together, drawing strength from partnership. The school opened with 12 students and 1 teacher. Magnolia taught reading and arithmetic while Zeke provided lessons in practical skills. Education that prepared children for frontier life while opening doors to broader possibilities. The church welcomed its first congregation with singing that carried across the valley. Voices raised in gratitude for community that had learned to stand together. Worship that celebrated justice alongside mercy. Federal investigators completed their work, sending several territorial officials to prison alongside Blackwood. The railroad conspiracy collapsed completely, its architects facing justice in federal court. New homesteaders arrived regularly, drawn by reports of fair dealing and honest opportunity. Families of all backgrounds finding welcome in a community that had learned to value character over appearance. The Thornfield Ranch became a model for ethical business practices. Employees treated fairly regardless of origin. Profits shared with those who created them. Success that lifted everyone rather than concentrating wealth. 5 years after that desperate dawn, Zeke and Magnolia stood on their porch watching their children play in the yard. 2 daughters who would grow up knowing their worth wasn't determined by others' prejudices. The valley stretched before them. dotted with farms and ranches owned by people who'd found opportunity through honest work. Community that had learned to protect its own while welcoming newcomers. The fence post where everything began now bore a simple plaque. Words that told. The story of love triumphing over hatred. Justice prevailing over corruption. Hope surviving despair. Their love story had become legend in the valley. Tale told to children about courage rewarded and decency vindicated. Proof that refusing to accept society's limitations could change. Not just individual fate, but community character. The sun set over land that belonged to people who'd earned it through honest effort. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. But they would face them together as they had from that first desperate dawn. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, and if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.